Welcome to this episode of Better Life Today. You know, we all have a story. We all have something to share. Some of the stories are easy. Some of the stories are really challenging. And today, we're going to be talking about one of the more challenging stories that I've heard. And my guests are Dave and Joe Englehorn. I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you for being willing to share your story about some of the things that have happened in your life. You hear different experiences all the time, and like I said, some stories are hard, some are easy. I want to know a little bit more about you. Tell me a little bit about where you came from and what's your background.
Okay, well, Dave and I have been married 36 years. We met at a little church in Encinitas, California. I remember meeting his toddlers at the time, and I just fell in love with his family. I was originally from the Monterey County area, but had been living in San Diego area ever since I got my teaching credential. So I was working in the Vista schools down there, and Dave was down on an assignment, and well, there's a lot more to the story, but that's what it's not about this.
Right, so you're a teacher then.
So I'm a retired teacher from California. We moved up here 3 years ago, and I was a little hesitant about the move. We were leaving loved ones in Southern California. We felt God was leading us, and I think God was directing Dave, and Dave was directing me. So it took me a little longer to adjust.
To buy into the move.
To buy into it.
Yes.
And, but it's been such a great blessing, and we're very, very happy to be here. It's not without its challenges, but we have made the most wonderful friends, and we love our church.
Very good.
Yeah.
And Dave, she mentioned that you were on assignment. What were you doing?
Well, I was living up here with my previous wife, actually, and a company that came into the boys club in town where I was the director at that time raised a lot of money for us, and they offered me a job and asked me to go to San Diego and open an office. So I went down there, and I went back to the little church that I was baptized in, and was greeting at that church when Joe walked in. And the church was having some challenges with growth and different offshoot groups. And so we wanted to make sure that Joe didn't get dragged into one of those groups, and so we brought her over for lunch. She fell in love with our two older kids. And
Who were very young.
Yes, they were 2 and 3 at the time. And then the company went bankrupt, and I came back to the house that I had here in Grants Pass.
Right. So the story you're going to share with us has to do with one of your children. So tell me about your kids. How many kids do you have, or did you have?
We have raised 5 children, all of them adopted. The oldest is 45, the youngest is 27. They all come from really challenging backgrounds. You just never know where they're going to come from and what they're going to bring with them and stuff like that. And so they have different nationalities. They've had alcohol backgrounds, drug babies, meth babies and things like that, mixed race. Our oldest daughter was born in a Seventh-day Adventist clinic in Mexicali, Mexico.
Wow.
And we had intended to adopt her. Then once I arrived down there to pick up our child, the authorities saw a white American, and the adoption was off for that.
So some challenges throughout
it's been challenging all along, but quite a ride and a lot of fun.
Right. So you have a specific story to share about one of your sons. Tell me about your son. What was his name?
His name was Zachary.
Zachary.
And he came to us miraculously, just like all the other children did. And when Joe and I adopted him, he's the only one that we adopted together at birth. Joe came into my life when my other two were 6 and 7. And then our two sibling sisters that we adopted were 4 and 5. Zachary, Joe was actually the birth coach, and that's
Really?
another story, but she was there, so when he came out, he was handed to her and said, "Here is your son." And so that was kind of the special connection there.
And tell me a little bit about him growing up.
Go ahead, sweetie.
Full of personality, funny, super smart, talking very, very young. Always had a laugh and a smile. Cutest face you've ever seen. You know, curly dark hair and big dark eyes. He was half black, half white, just a beautiful little boy. But I think it was his personality
Yes.
that sort of made people gravitate to him. He
just
always
drew
had a lot
people
of
in.
friends. He loved music. He was very artistic. He loved sports, but he was he liked the individual sports more, like
Yeah.
surfing and
Do you-
snowboarding.
Do you remember when his 5th grade teacher told us, "I wish I had an entire classroom of Zacharys"?
That was his 6th grade teacher.
Oh, okay.
I'll
Oh,
correct
man,
you on
just-
that one.
Oh.
I don't think his 5th grade teacher felt quite that
Oh, okay.
way, but yeah, he was a delight. He full of activity and charming. But I think the best trait that he had was that he was very compassionate
Very much so.
toward other kids, other people. He was really, really kind. So, he really brightened our home. I can't think of a time when he was young that I don't remember getting mad at him. I don't know why. He was just pretty easy.
Yeah, just
you
a
know?
really sweet spirit, it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun.
All right. And as he grew, what were his interests? What did he enjoy doing, and what did he do for work eventually?
Well, as a son, he hung out with his dad quite a bit when he got older. And I loved surfing and camping and things like that. And so he took up surfing at quite a young age, did very well. And we've got some surfing shots of him that are pretty amazing. And one of the dads who had a son as well that we surfed with was a photographer, took pictures of different waves that we've caught and things like that.
He was great with his hands. He loved to build
Yeah, he was
and
very creative.
we used to buy him toys when he was little, and we finally came to the conclusion we just had to get a bunch of boxes, string, tape, ribbon glue, whatnot, little wheels or whatever. But he pretty much ignored the toys and delved into building things out of the boxes. So yeah, he was really fun. He was very into music, played the piano. We kind of forced that on him for a few years, and then he took up the guitar. So he really loved that, and played volleyball in high school and
Yes.
a little flag football and those things. Went to a Adventist academy, and yeah.
Well, one of the things that we tried to do with our children is you teach them the work ethic so they can survive in the world, and that paid off quite well. But we also believed in teaching them compassion. And the only way we felt that you could do that was you have to teach it by example.
Model it.
So our kids have all been on mission trips to different parts of the world and come back changed as a result of that. And Zach was one of those, especially when he went to the Amazon basin and did a dental and trip down there building fences and corrals for this little village. He came back very changed from that. So that was
What a
good.
blessing. You brought in, how many children was it? 7 children?
There were 5.
5 children.
Only 5.
Okay, only 5.
Yes.
And you brought them in from various backgrounds, and what an opportunity each of them had to be in a supportive family and to enjoy. I have 3 sisters that were adopted, and sometimes I think about what would life have been like if different choices have been made, and what a blessing it was for them to be part of my family.
Oh, yeah.
Except when it wasn't. I was the youngest, and I'm sure I made it pretty miserable at times for them, but it just sounds really, really idyllic.
Yeah.
Something happened one day, though, something that changed everything. Why don't you tell me what happened, Dave?
Well, our son lived at home with us. He was 24 years old when this happened, but he lived at home with us because he and a girlfriend created a child, and when he wanted to take on the responsibility of raising this child and providing for its care, it was very expensive to have your own apartment, so he lived with us. And he had a certain practice on a Friday evening. He played music up in his room, and he had a complete set of music production equipment up there. He produced background music CDs. And so that was typically where he went on a Friday evening. And upstairs. And then when it was bedtime, if the music was a little loud, I'd just tap on the door and say, "Hey, son, we're going to bed." And he'd turn it down. And
We did have a rule, because he liked loud music, he had to keep his one window closed. So he had a room upstairs, one window closed. He would put heavy curtains over it to block the noise, because we didn't live in the country. We lived in the neighborhood. And sometimes he even put a little bit of a towel underneath if he thought the noise was going to bother us as we went to our room. So he was trying to be respectful, and we tried to respect that. He was 24. We weren't telling him what he could or could not do anymore on Sabbath or whatever. You know, we were letting him figure things out, you know? So.
And this particular night, my wife and I were downstairs, and we were watching a Christian video, and when we went to go back upstairs, the music was, you know, playing. And so, as I mentioned before, I'd tap on the door, and the music didn't get turned down this time. So I would typically just let myself in the room, go over, turn the music down, shut off the light, and go out. And I did exactly that.
Except I had already gone to bed 2 hours before that. And normally we would say, we would text, "It's Sabbath, could you turn down your bass?" And when Dave started to do that when we were downstairs, I said, "Oh, let's let him be. You know, he's worked hard all week, and it's not really that bothersome. Let's just let it go." So we never texted him or said we're home, because, you know, he faces the street. He knows when we get home and that kind of thing. So after a week long with first graders, I went to bed at 9.
Just very tired.
I was so tired. And Dave stayed up another couple of hours.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to hear more about what happened.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Better Life Broadcasting is a viewer-supported Christian media ministry that offers streaming programming via apps on various devices. Please visit blbn.org to support Better Life or to get more information. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome back. My guests today are Dave and Joe Engelhorn, and you're sharing with us a night where your lives changed. So let's hear more about what happened. You were in bed asleep, and you were going to check on your son.
Yes, and so when he didn't turn the music down, I let myself into the room, and he was laying on the bed, kind of on his shoulder, his left shoulder, and his feet over the edge of the bed. But I was kind of used to that, because surfers sleep on the beach, on the rocks, on sand, and anything like that. So I would just come in, turn the music down, and sometimes just move him into a nice position.
Cover him up.
So this time I went in, I shut the music, and I was almost going to leave him in that position, because I figured he'd straighten out, but something didn't quite look right. So I went over to move him, and I realized that there was not any life in him. There was something wrong with what was going on. And I immediately realized that he had been in distress and needed to have CPR. So I pulled him off the bed and began CPR.
Breathe.
You never know how well you'll do in CPR until you have to do it. And when you're performing CPR on your son, that's a pretty scary experience. So I continued doing that and got no response. And in the meantime, our daughter had come home, and I asked her, she had come up right away as I just started, and I asked her to call 911 and go down outside and make sure that the paramedics find the right house. And I didn't want her to see this happening as well. They came, and the whole staff came upstairs. There were 6 of them. And they knew us because with my wife teaching in the community for so many years, a lot of the law enforcement and fire department things, they knew the Engelhorn family. So they were up there helping out. And I just stepped back and watched the rest. And our son was flatlined the whole time. There was nothing that they could do. However, the emergency room doctor at the hospital said because of his age and things like that, rush him here anyway. We're going to do whatever we can.
Right.
And that's what they did. They took him away. And I awakened my wife and said, honey, we've got to go to the hospital. And it's kind of a blur getting to the hospital, but once we got there, he was, in emergency care, and we just waited. And that was on the 8th of April started at about 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night, and they pronounced him dead a few minutes after 12 on the 9th.
Wow.
So that was the saddest.
Pretty rough. Yeah.
It's
was rough.
hard. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
I remember I really didn't know what happened. People can't believe I slept through this whole thing because they were working on him right outside my bedroom door. Dave woke me up and said, Zach's on the way to the hospital. So at that moment in time, I'm thinking, he's sick, or, it's serious, but, he must be okay. So I jump in the car, and on the way there, Dave said, honey, I'm so sorry, I tried. I really tried. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean you tried? And he kind of shook his head, and I said, you mean he's gone? And he said, he's gone. And that's where I learned. And so when we got there, and there were 7 or 8 people around his bed working on him, I mean, we were just in a state of shock, actually. And but we went into a little room and we prayed, and our girls were both there. And I don't know, it was an unbelievable experience. And he,
One of the sad parts was his daughter's 5th birthday party was the next weekend. And we had to let her know, and that was very difficult. She was brought to the hospital to say goodbye to her dad.
She was 4.
Wow. Yeah.
So
And
anyway.
So we had a 5th birthday party with her dad not there.
Right.
But the church rallied around. There was 47 people at a 5th birthday party. They all came and tried to be supportive.
Right.
And we had a loving church family, and they did a great job of helping us through that time.
Right. And that's one of my questions for you, because when these kind of things happen, I had shared with you when we were off air that I had lost my niece right before her 12th birthday.
Yeah.
And in some of those experiences, it's like, where's God? And a lot of people in those moments lose their faith or question, or where were you with God during this?
Well, first of all, we had no idea what killed him. And so the report came 3 months later, and we found out it was a chemical in,
I'll say it.
go ahead.
Okay. He died of an accidental ingestion or breathing in of difluorothane. And difluorothane is an odorless, tasteless, deadly propellant in the cans of the products that you use to spray the dust off the keys of your keyboards. And up in his room, he had computer keys, but he also had piano keys and things like that, and he dusted everything off. He was breathing that in an enclosed room, not knowing.
Right, because he had a history of blocking,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know, covering the windows to
Yeah.
make
know-
sure the sound wasn't bothering other people.
The police had checked his room. They were looking for obvious things, maybe, you know, regarding a 24-year-old, drugs, alcohol,
Right,
that
right.
kind of thing, and they didn't find anything. And that wasn't present in his body when they, you know, took all the tests afterwards. But he didn't know what happened to him. When we learned, we walked into his room, and there were the dusty, dirty rags and that bottle sitting on his desk.
Yeah.
So we knew what he had been doing. But back to your original question about how we dealt with it, you know, I went on later on, I went on a couple of online grief groups, and I was astounded at how many people were so angry at God and blamed God and were walking away from their faith, and couples breaking up because people grieve a different way and they could not understand each other's, you know, way of grieving. And I remember thinking, I never felt that anger toward God. I was angry at the creators of the product, but I was not upset with God at all. And I remember thinking, if we loved our son Zachary as much as we did, how much more God loved him. And, you know, people try to say comforting things to you, like, it must have been God's will. And not once did I ever buy that.
Yeah.
God is the creator of life, not death. And he may bring good out of a tragedy, but not once did I ever think that he intended that to happen. He allowed it. He has his purpose for allowing it, and someday we'll get to sit at the feet of Jesus and ask, what was your plan in all this?
Yeah.
How come he had to leave a 4-year-old and that kind of thing? And I would really caution people to be careful what they say to a parent who is grieving. You know, we heard a lot of things like, I know how you feel, we lost our family dog, you know, or I know how you feel, my grandfather died. And I would say, oh, I'm sorry, how old was your grandfather? Oh, he was 85. And I'm thinking, Zach was 24.
I know.
No, I kind of think an 84-year-old is going to go before.
Yeah, and
You know.
it's not to discount their grief.
No,
it's
not
just
at
that
all.
It does not inform them on what you're. I mean, even you two are going to experience it differently.
And
so
we
you
did
probably
that.
don't know how she felt,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yeah, it's just, you never do know. I remember someone saying something about their family dog, and I said, well, just to let you know, we lost our family dog of 15 years
The
1 week
the week
before we lost our
before.
son. And I would say, and I can kind of tell you that there is a little bit of difference in that grieving process. I felt like we handled comments kindly, but we were trying to let people know what's best to give someone in that position is a hug, I'm sorry, and, you know, I'd like to be there for you.
Right,
That's
right.
it. That's it.
Right.
One of the things that we did for each other is we allowed each other to grieve in our own way and not be critical of it and not try to change it, because every person grieves differently.
Right.
We're very blessed that we have a strong marriage with the Lord in the middle of that.
Amen.
And we had no idea how strong that connection was until this happened. And it strengthened us, and it's given us an opportunity to witness to others and
Right.
to share with others. and to be present when others have losses. Because we had one of Zach's friends, when he was in school in elementary school, died a year later in
He
a
was a
tragic car
former
accident.
student of mine. And
We were able to work with that couple, and one of the things that I did was the men grieved differently, and so I stayed in touch with the father. And every Sabbath morning I'd text him and check and see how he was doing, and then we would meet, maybe at Starbucks, we'd have prayer together and help them get through that. So it's given us that opportunity.
women tend to have other women flock to them. Women are very, nurturing, and so I had a lot of, comfort from my friends, but I did notice, where were the men? The men weren't there, and
Yeah.
not because they didn't care or did not, empathize or anything like that. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They really
Well, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you came in to share this story. For me, the takeaways are, God is with us.
do. Yes.
It's not his fault, but he will walk through it with us. And he is the one that understands because
and-
he's the creator.
And because his own son,
Amen.
died I was always so grateful to God that Zach's death was a peaceful one,
Yeah.
I think, for
Yeah.
the most part. And then I think about what God our Father endured.
That's right.
Watching his son on the
and then we
cross.
have the hope that he gives us
That's
that
right.
what happens in this life is not the end. And
Yeah.
we can look forward to that. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. And again, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I join you in looking forward to understanding more
Yeah.
And that
when Jesus
reunion.
comes. Amen.
Yes. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Better Life Today. Goodbye.